Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to my channel, I Hate Rock Music. Today I want to talk about Hard Stuff. Really interesting, unique band. And I first came across them because I was living in New York at the time, and WNEW was famous for playing a lot of imports. And I was listening to the radio one night, and a song called The Orchestrator by Hard Stuff was played. I was completely blown away. And so, fortunately, soon after that, I found a copy of their album Bolex Dementia and Cutouts, and was pretty much floored. Just such an original band, and a lot of really impressive hard rock, which I love, but all kinds of quirkiness and weirdness that really astounded me. Of course, that's back in the days before the internet and YouTube, and you couldn't really find out that much about bands. It's so easy to do now. But I had no idea for a long time that they had a first album, Bulletproof, that was import only. And so it was probably about 10 more years before I ever picked up that one. But the history of the band is really interesting. Of course, John Cann, who's kind of famous for those of us who love the rock underground, he was in a band called The Attack, and he was also in a band called 5 Day a Week Straw People, and then most famously a band called Andromeda put out an album on RCA in 1969. And so the seeds of Hard Stuff were laid in those bands. In fact, they ended up reworking some of the material. But most famously, of course, John Cann was in Atomic Rooster with their breakthrough album Death Walks Behind You. And John Cann's amazing guitar work is all over that record, along with his vocals and some of his writing. And so he was in Atomic Rooster with drummer Paul Hammond. And so Atomic Rooster got to their third album, In Hearing of Atomic Rooster, and Peter French was brought in on vocals from the band Leafhound. And John Cann and Paul Hammond decided to leave the band for two reasons. One, they didn't like the new kind of R&B direction, bluesy R&B direction that Atomic Rooster, Vincent Crane, was pushing the band into. And so they weren't happy about that. And they also weren't happy about the fact that John Cann apparently did a lot of great guitar work on that album. And when Vincent Crane, the producer, got a hold of the tapes, they mixed down and mixed out a lot of John Cann's guitar work, which is really unfortunate. The album could have benefited a lot from some more amazing John Cann guitar work. So John Cann and Paul Hammond decided they were going to start their own band, and they snagged bassist John Gustafson, who was in the band Quatermass. And Quatermass had one album, I believe it was 1970, a keyboard, bass, and drums lineup with John Gustafson playing bass and singing. And he had a remarkable voice. And so the band Hard Stuff was born, although they were actually called Damon at first, and then they changed their name to Bullet. And then they had some legal disputes with an American band already called Bullet. And so then they just changed the name to Hard Stuff and called their first album Bulletproof, which was a little dig at the American band. But wow, what a band. They actually put out one single as Bullet, the song Hobo, backed with Sinister Minister. And there's a couple different European picture sleeves for it. So it was out there for a little bit before they changed their name. And then they forged ahead with Hard Stuff. Originally, they had a vocalist named Harry Shaw, and a bunch of demos were recorded by the band Bullet with Harry Shaw in the band. And they basically booted him out and then reworked a lot of the material and released their first album in 1972, Bulletproof. And so now, of course, all the Bullet demos are available as a CD and a double LP, Bullet Entrance to Hell. And a lot of interesting stuff on that, and a lot of songs that ended up being done by Hard Stuff and reworked by Hard Stuff, although a lot of stuff from the sessions were actually put on the Hard Stuff record. But they quickly got signed by Purple Records, and Bulletproof came out, and it's really an amazing record. just the songs on there that are really hard rock are really punching, really pummeling, and John Cann's guitar sound is very specific, and he lays down some pretty amazing riffs, and they're just such a great band. Paul Hammond and John Gustafson are a really formidable rhythm section. But the album is also punctuated by a lot of quirky tunes, with John Gustafson doing some really oblique melodies, and some of it's actually funky. And I've read interviews, and John Gustafson said that he brought that element into the band. So it makes a really interesting mix. These real hard rockers mixed with these really quirky, oblique, evocative semi-funk numbers, with just nice layers of John Cann's guitar work on them. And so they issued that album. It did fairly well. They toured all over Europe. They notably did a show in the UK opening for Captain Beefheart, which would have been an interesting combination. So then by 1973, they recorded Bolex Dementia, the follow-up, and it didn't do quite as well. And they put out the record in the U.S., amazingly. Came out on Mercury Records in the U.S. And of course, the UK cover, and it was issued in all the European countries and Japan as well. And the cover is pretty horrific. I love it. I think it's an amazing cover, but it was pretty horrific. Mercury didn't think the U.S. audience was ready for that, so they issued it with a completely different cover, which is a pretty interesting cover as well. But I should back up a little bit. Peter French was actually picked as the first singer. John Cann and John Gustafson, when they left Atomic Rooster, they wanted Peter French to come along with him, and he declined, so they ended up with Harry Shaw. But so then the non-LP single Orchestrator came out as well, and then Bolex Dementia. And Bolex Dementia, I read a lot of comments that people were disappointed by it, and the critics were disappointed by it. But I think it's a great record. Once again, it's a really great mix of really pummeling hard rock numbers with incredibly unique riffs, and John Cann's unmistakable guitar style, and once again mixed with some really quirky, funky, oblique songs mixed in it, and that's what makes hard stuff particularly special for me. I know a lot of people prefer that they would just do all hard rock numbers on both their albums, but I think the odd mixture they do makes them that much more unique, and a great mixture, and makes them one of the most distinctive bands to come out of the whole hard rock arena. But then a couple of members got in a car crash and derailed the career of hard stuff. They broke up soon after that. They released one last single on Purple Records too, called "How Do You Do It," and the flip side was "Inside Your Life," and way more pop. In fact, the flip side, "Inside Your Life," has backup singers and keyboards, and you can hear a little quirkiness in there. But and "How Do You Do It's" a little more hard rocking, but they're definitely going in a lot more commercial direction, and I'm really kind of surprised. So it tells me that if there had been a third hard stuff record, it would have been a lot more commercial, and I guess that makes sense for them to go in that direction. But that last single's disappointing to say the least. And right after that, 1974, John Cann actually toured Germany with Thin Lizzy, and there's a couple of tapes from that show out there, from those shows. I think Frankfurt and Stuttgart. The Stuttgart one is a lot less listenable, but the one in Frankfurt is obviously a board tape. They brought in second guitarist Andy G, and it really looks interesting on paper, the whole idea of John Cann being in Thin Lizzy. I don't know if he considered joining the band, because of course that was the period where Gary Moore had been their guitar player after Eric Bell left. And then, of course, Gary Moore left, and so they were probably looking at other guitar players, and perhaps John Cann was one of them. But you can tell they weren't rehearsed. It's pretty sloppy, but still intriguing to hear John Cann playing with Thin Lizzy. And then, of course, after that, John Gustafson moved on to bands like Roxy Music, and John Cann made a couple of solo records. But Hard Stuff was a really incredible band. I'm glad we've got those two albums. I'm surprised there's no BBC sessions available because they played a lot of shows, and there aren't any BBC live concerts. That was the prime period for BBC live shows, and apparently there aren't any, and there aren't any other live shows or snippets even that have popped up, and it's really too bad. I would be really curious to hear what their live sound was, but I guess we'll never know because if it was going to surface, it would have surfaced by now. So there we have it. Hard Stuff, great band. A lot of people have heard them by now. If you haven't heard them, I'll put the links below. Check them out. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.